Hello and welcome to ET Auto Startup Adda. This is the fifth episode of Startup Adda. This is a show that tries to bring out the innovators, the disruptors, or the startup founders who are going to change the future landscape in mobility industry. Today we have a very interesting founder of startup. You can call him a serial entrepreneur at a very young age. This is his second entrepreneurial venture that he has taken up, and this is in mobility space. Uh, he is a young entrepreneur hailing from Bihar, small town in Bihar. He is son of a school teacher who came to Delhi. He studied in one of the private schools in Delhi. Then he went to Delhi College of Engineering. He did his BTech from there, and then he went to Cornell University. And upon returning, he started his first startup called Cube 26 that was into mobile phone software and value added service, which was acquired by Paytm in 2017. In 2018, again, this young lad started another company in the electric three-wheeler space, which is called Euler Motors. And let me introduce to you Saurav Kumar from Bihar, who has set up this Euler Motors. And in the span of 3 years, he has already got 11 million of investment from four VCs, and he has already tested his electric three wheelers for the last 3 years, and now he is ready to roll this out for the e-commerce business, especially in the delivery space. And he also uh, aims to bring it to the common user of electric three wheelers also. And today's expert is Mr. Ashok Bhasin. Everybody knows Mr. Ashok Bhasin is one of the leaders in automotive industry. He was head of sales and marketing and customer care at world largest two-wheeler company, Hero Motorcorp. He was with the Whirlpool in the US. He has been training a lot of global C-suite leaders. His keen interest, or he is very passionate about mentoring, helping the clean mobility startups. Thank you so much, Mr. Ashok Bhasinji, for joining in at ET Auto Startup Adda. Sort of just want to understand, we have seen a lot of buzz around electric three wheelers. That looks like, the domain that is going to be early in terms of adoption of electric vehicles. So far, how the journey been? You jumped from software to more of a hardware-oriented company that's electric three-wheeler manufacturing. How this transition take place? What really attracted you towards it?
Okay, thanks Naveel for having me on the show, and good to chat again. So we started in 2018, and let me just take you back to how the journey started and our thought process back then. So, so when we're thinking, so when I started the second company, I was thinking about a couple of things. Uh, one of the fundamental things that I had realized building the first company was that whatever you build, it takes a couple of decades to sort of make the impact. And so when I was looking at some of the segments in electric mobility, it seemed like one of the right areas to focus in. I mean, India, obviously, having its commitment to global climate issues, and especially part of the Paris Climate Accord, with more than 10 cities having rising level of air pollution, it seemed like the right sort of business where you can obviously create shareholder wealth, but at the same time you can actually solve uh, societal challenge. And I think that was very interesting for me. I just wanted to note that. Uh, Specifically, you talked about the transition from software to hardware. So as I think you spoke about my school days at DP Sarkipuram, and then engineering college days at Delhi College of Engineering, and then at Cornell. So whenever I think about that journey, as I was a child, I was always passionate about robotics. I used to build like small robots. I mean, it started with like remote control cars, but then you started building line follower robot as an engineer, and then you started building the let's just say ground vehicle, underwater vehicle, those drones, and I think that gave me a fundamental into building engineering products. Even today, when I think about electric vehicle, I still see them as the similar sort of, but at a larger scale, where you are thinking about business, you're thinking about customer sales, some of that. But from an engineering point of view, that was something that I was always very, very passionate about. So transitioning was not difficult. It was something actually going back to what I enjoyed the most during my childhood days to now. In terms of how we started and how we thought about Euler, so we looked at what India has done in the electric vehicle space from all the way from 2010 to the 18 journey. And one of the things that I realized that commercial vehicle space is very interesting area to be in. And I mean, while our first 3 years have we have spent significant amount of time building the three-wheeler commercial vehicle, but going forward, we'll also think about getting into some of the other form factors of the commercial vehicle as well. But in general, we liked commercial vehicle more because of the total cost of ownership, because of the pattern, how the vehicle usage happens, and we can get into some of these details as the conversation moves forward. So commercial vehicle made a lot of sense to us. The second thing that we realized that to be an OEM, and if you want to accelerate this transition to electric mobility, you cannot just think about making vehicles only. You have to think about the ecosystem. And today we also have like we operate like a largest network of charging stations. So we have 100 of charging station, and these are DC fast charging station running in Delhi NCR. So that's the other thing that we have sort of built other than the vehicle. And then of course you work with some of these customers where we found out that the e-commerce, FMCG, and your other organized segments like the utility, pharma, these would be the first to transition, and that's where we focused a lot of our early energy on and trying to convince them about adopting electric vehicle in their last mile transport. So that's, I think, the how we fundamentally look at the space first, and then within space we looked at one product that we wanted to build, and then within that we looked at who would be my first customer set. So that's how we identified our journey, and I think that 3 years today in building Euler Motors, we are almost ready with our three-wheeler cargo product that we would launch, that has a network of charging station backing that product. If it comes out and it is running on the ground, then people can go and get charging and get parking, all of that solution sorted. And we also, I think you talked about capital in the very early days. So we have also raised capital from some of the global and India VC firms, so Asian Development Banks, VC arm, then Inventors Capital, Bloom Ventures, Jetty Ventures. A couple of those guys also came in and took sort of bet on what we are building, because it fundamentally sort of made a lot of sense in terms of what we are doing.
What made you sell your previous startup and get into this? Did you sell it because you wanted to venture into EV space, or it just happened by chance? What was the
I think it
idea?
just it will just happen. I think there's a point in life when you believe that you started with something, and then it has come to its natural sort of conclusion. And that's when I think that is. So we ran Q26 for almost 7 years. That was first time where we learned actually a lot about business. Before that, I was more of an engineering, doing computer science coding, and I learned about your marketing, business development, building team, all of that at Q26. And I think that was a wonderful 7 year journey. Obviously, we had a lot of challenges. We pivoted, we faced a lot of issues, but I think all of that gave us a lot of learning, which we used while we were building Euler Motors. So that journey came to its natural conclusion where we felt that this is where with Paytm it has found its new home, and then we started Euler Motors.
Did you ever think of picking up a job? You have very good profile, and corporate industry look forward to such talent. Did you not get lured by any of the offers that you might have got, even after that Cube 26, which did not do so well as expected? So was that
So actually, so before Cube 26, if you actually go 3 years back, so after graduating from Cornell, I worked at a startup in New York. This was a advertisement based startup. I was working on their research and development piece, and that so I had almost a year stint with them, and then I went to work with Yahoo in Silicon Valley, and roughly I think 1.5 year I worked with them. So I worked with both startup and a large corporation. So I had that journey. And after building Cube 26, I felt that my time was best spent where I can solve some of the toughest engineering challenges that are there. And also that made a lot of business sense. So when we're doing Euler Motors, while there were a lot of technology related things that we were solving, we also saw this opportunity where I could go back and make a lot of impact, and impact where you can take something from ground zero and sort of like be the leader in that industry. So that kind of impact very rarely comes while working for large organizations. So it was more like a personal choice where I felt I'll be more creative to the point when some of these unknowns and walls are lesser sort of constrained, and I think you can explore a different direction.
sort of, we have seen the larger, stakeholders in the three-wheeler space like Bajaj Auto, TVS. They did not, really ride into this. Does that make you think that is it really going to work out? Is it going to pick up or not? Uh, did it really influence you? Okay, why these biggies are not in this space? And am I here in the right direction? Or is it something that is not going to happen? Have you ever thought or something of that sort?
See, so देखिए, I think fundamentally when you build business, Nabil, I think competition is definitely you kind of keep track of. But at the end of the day, when we were starting in 2018, at least in the commercial three-wheeler cargo, there were almost none of either. There were many startups or big player that was focused on the cargo, and I think we fundamentally looked at the business from like who our end customers are going to be, what are the dynamics of these electric vehicle, I mean why does the transition not happening. And when we dissected it from that perspective, we felt that this made like all the right I mean it was ticking sort of like all the right question boxes that were there. And I think at that point there was a fundamental gut based conviction based feeling that you have that you're going to build it. And yes, you don't know answers to all of that question, but as time progresses you will learn about some of the challenges and you will solve them. So I think that was more based on conviction at that point, backed by engineering, because I'm still like an engineer at heart. So there has to be logically, all the choices has to make sense, and beyond that then you have to take that conviction and gut feeling. And I just took that, and I think even today I look at what some of the companies are doing, but I'm actually least bothered about what they're doing at the same time, because most of the time I'm just involved in what our customers are and are they happy, and what is the gap between what I'm offering and what they're willing to pay, and I continue to work toward making sure that Euler is bridging that gap.
I sort of just want to understand what are the moments or the reasons that makes you feel or you regret any regrets that you might have so far uh, when you were venturing into this space. Any thought that you would have started early, or you would have started in a different manner or something? Any sense that
The
would have
regrets.
been better,
So
or
regrets. Okay, in general, I don't have much regrets. Like I think I typically am kind of a person who follows it and to the point that if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I wouldn't leave something to chance. I mean that's something that I usually a bit scared that I don't want to say that yeah, I didn't try this, I didn't try that, or this happened because of that. Some and this also comes from a lot of experience from the first venture. So I typically don't like to keep, and I think if I have to go back, it will still I'll probably end up doing the same thing. I mean, there are some things like around I think financing and some of other I think elements of automotive manufacturing that which I learned along the way. If I had those some of those experience, I think I could have accelerated this even faster. But one thing that, from timing perspective, I think we were taught on timing. Any year later or any year behind would have not clicked in certain way because we are continuously running, we are continuously catching up. So there is no day in Euler where we feel कि हम लोग time से पहले हैं. Like I mean, and there is no slackness because of that. Because you are in 2018 from there on, I have seen government very focused on the electric vehicle policy, charging station, which was one of the thing in 2017. Before that, even owning a charging station was difficult. So all of that from policy perspective, your customers waking up to saying that electric mobility is going to happen, your battery prices falling to the point where you can think about a commercial viability of this happening. All of that was kind of falling in place. The only thing that was left was, uh, can Euler build a product not on Excel, not on a computer simulated model, but on ground? And when we talk about a typical startup journey, you talk about product market fit, कि आपने वो product बनाया है जो market में fit हो रही है. And when you talk about that journey, one is obviously what's the minimum product that you build that can get, let's just say, certification from government. But then when you give it to the customer, for them, minimum product definition changes very differently. So we actually named it differently. We say India market fit in typically, because when we built a three-wheeler cargo for a spec and you give it to a customer, they would overload it, they would over drain it. So you have weather conditions in India where in rainy season you have subway filled with water. So all of that is a very different challenge, and you can't like just prepare everything for it in a computer simulation. So you actually have to go live that journey, iterate, and build that product from a India product fit. So regrets wise like very less.
sort of just, I mean, curious to know one particular specific event or a statement or something that really was the final push for you to get into EVA space or electric three wheeler. Why did you think that, okay, I will do this? What was that moment? What was that event? Or anybody said something? Or what really triggered you to get into that? That, okay, I want to do this. Electric is a big space. You could have done anything, but why did you think electric three wheeler? If you could just briefly tell us.
So, uh, okay, so I think in after Cube 26, there was this moment when I was thinking about what to do next, and at that point of time, I was actually looking at some of the global transitions that were happening. So there was I saw in fintech something around crypto was happening. Then I saw electric vehicle was one, and then space technology was three. So we I looked at sort of three segments. To be very honest, I was giving you a 2017-18 my mind's set. And then I looked at also if you're building it in India, I looked at like some of the Indian policies. I looked at how much capital will be required to build this business out, and how do I sort of get that capital, build something, and then get out and then iterate on that sort of journey. When I say get out, get the product out to the customers, right? And when I ran those all of those three, I mean the business choices that I had. Electric vehicle again, then it fundamentally looked like I have built this in past, like as a kid. So there was that joy part, and I know that like building startup is extremely tough, and especially building something in deep tech space because there is a long ingestion period in which you are building, and it's actually hardware and software. And lot of it's very difficult for people who can value that journey. People can value when your product is out, then they can see the difference that product can make. But while that product is in making, that journey, it's very difficult to, let's just say, raise money for that journey, get people excited for that journey, because that's still like, a transition that is going to go through. So I mapped that. And then and I think after that it was more like, while I was in US, I saw Tesla. When I used to, for my previous Q26, I used to visit China, Taiwan, some of these places, because all of our customers used to get their phone manufactured in those countries. So I could see how Neo or BYD and some of these guys building electric vehicle. You can see a electric bus going, and then you see an electric taxi going, and
Why
then one
three
day
wheeler?
you are in that.
Why three wheeler you chose?
Okay, so that was so if you looked at some of these segments, so there are, if you think about automotive, there are private vehicle and commercial vehicle. In private vehicle, you have two-wheeler and four-wheeler car, and then in commercial vehicle, you look at light electric commercial vehicle, medium heavy, and heavy commercial vehicle. We picked up light electric commercial vehicle, wherein we said we look at the three-wheeler and four-wheeler small commercial vehicles. And within that, then we looked at, okay, so this is the segment which is large enough, very less competition. Let's focus on that space. Why? If you look at, I'll give you the simplest thesis, right? Simplest thesis is in commercial vehicle, whoever buys this vehicle, they're running it for almost 80 to 100 kilometers every day. A diesel vehicle typically costs you around 3 rupees to 3.5 rupees per kilometer. An electric vehicle operation costs you around 50 to 70 paisa per kilometer. Every day, roughly, I mean, 3 rupees to 2.5 rupees a kilometer you save. So roughly, you end up saving 300 rupees to 200 to 250, anywhere between that every day. And if you think about, let's just say in a year you are running for 300 days, you take 2 months off, then also you're thinking about saving 60,000 rupees on a year. Versus if you think about private vehicle, most days you're running 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers. There are some peak days when you think about driving 200, 300 kilometers. Just this, that operational cost that is there in owning the vehicle. So one is what you pay upfront, but the other cost that hits you more is over that 7, 8 years of that life cycle. And in that, you end up saving a lot. So that made fundamental sense.
Yeah, sort of that's the case for many implement that we have at our home, that the utilization is optimal utilization is not happening in many cases. Anyway, you chose three wheeler. Just want to go back to your answer. You said that you were trying the idea of getting into crypto or fintech or space. All these sectors seems to be booming. Look at the fintech; they are growing very fast. Since then, crypto has grown much faster than electric, or the fintech even grown much faster than the electric three wheeler right now. Uh, do you have any thought right now? Okay, I probably would have started in crypto, or I would have started in fintech. That would have made me better. Or you're contented person right now.
So one of the other thing that I looked at, which is why I kept on coming back to electric vehicle, is the other thing that interests me a lot is the combination of hardware and software. I think that for any human being at a fundamental level, right? I mean, I think what we call about our senses or indriya, hardware allows you that form factor of touch and feel, and software is something which I believe you can add intelligence, and you don't have to necessarily change the form factor every time to power different sort of experience. And when I believe that you have hardware and software come together, that experience is very beautiful, and that is like another sort of fundamental thing that I approach and look at. And so that was where electric vehicle was making most amount of sense.
Sort of, can you give us a idea? What are the pain points you want to resolve in your domain right now? if somebody can resolve those pain points for you, you can scale up. What are those pain points, if you could share with us?
Okay, so major today, I think now that let's just say you built a product, you spent 3 years, you did a lot of R&D, you did a lot of pilots with customer, you lived that 3 years of journey of product development, and you want to scale. Vehicle financing is something that is hitting us right now very, very heavily, and because uh, the people, or let's just say the folks who finances vehicle, they're still unclear about the secondary life of these electric vehicles. They're still unclear about what would happen. Let's just say tomorrow there is an NPA happening and those vehicles gets impounded. What will happen to battery pack if it is remain impounded for 2 months? And will how will they get the salvage value? So all of that, because there is a lot of unanswered question around it. Your vehicle financing is one of the toughest sort of discussion right now, and majority of customer in at least in commercial vehicle, they would pay, let's just say, 10%, 20% down payment, because these are the guys who would come with to showroom with 10,000, 20,000 rupees, and they would make that down payment, and they would want to get that EMI that they can pay off in 3 years, run it for 5, 6 years, sell it to the next sort of fleet owner, and then they would get on the ladder of in general in society. So that's the kind of I mean, the challenge right now that we have is, while IC engine, if you compare it with EVs, ICs are at a lower cost, upfront cost, and your cost of financing is also lower. So actually, the customer who is going to buy an electric vehicle, they have to think about higher sort of upfront cost, and not that also have to pay higher EMIs because of the higher interest rate. So that's I think one area where I really hope, and like I can see a lot of companies also start up, and some of the traditional guys also coming up and working. I think NBFC is one, or even if the government banks can come and finance some of or prioritize financing of commercial vehicle, I think that would accelerate I mean,
Overall
this EV
financing of
transition.
electric vehicle is a problem here in India right now. Sort of, it's really an inspiring story. Just want to understand what is the next step for Euler Motors. What kind of top line you see? What is the immediate that you are going to do? Can you share with us?
Yes,
And
so our product is close to ready. We'll be launching the three-wheeler cargo, the let's just say in the next 2 to 3 months. That's our target. The vehicle is already there. We have been testing it. We have done roughly 10 to 12 million kilometers of test, and we are very satisfied with what we have built. And one of the fundamental things that we wanted to focus on was the product cannot be inferior to ICE engine vehicle in any other sort of, whether it's diesel, CNG, or petrol, in terms of its performance and efficiency. That was one of the, like, a line that we wrote in our product development thesis, that if your product is inferior, transition will never happen. So today we are very happy with the product that we have built. The next step was the order book. So some of our customers who have been running and deploying and testing these vehicles, they have given us an order book of 2,500 vehicles that has to be deployed in the next 1 year. So we are going to scale our manufacturing at this point of time, so that we can start producing at these at scale and deploy them. And I think that's my second sort of target. And third would be to just sort of look at the next form factor of the product and continue expanding this journey to the light commercial vehicle segment.
we'll look forward to understand the quality of the vehicle. How are you trying to match in all aspect of IC once the vehicle is on the road? Now it's time to call in the expert for today's session, Mr. Ashok Bhasin. You all know he has been with Startup Adda since the first or second episode of the show. Startup Adda, as it is known, station for innovation. You have seen the innovation or the inspiration that we can get from these disruptors. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhasin. Over to you. Now you can pose your questions of after summarizing your thoughts on Euler Motors.
Thank you, Nabil, for having me on your session today. And of course, once again, a pleasure to meet you, Saurav, here on this interesting occasion where you are sort of sharing your thoughts provoked by Nabil's incisive questioning. Uh, but I think to start with, what I would say is that there is a very sweet spot in terms of how I see the broader market opportunity and what I heard from Saurav. So I must compliment Saurav that you have thought through some of the contours of the opportunity, the contours of what will make it possible to succeed quite well. So, electric and clean mobility, I think, is a very large market size opportunity. So, I reinforce that. Uh, Also, I am a big fan of this unique sweet spot between the hardware and software. And I was smiling when you said that, and I say that all the time, that if you can hardwire the engineering and then softwire the experience, that is the unique combination. And I think you said it in your own words that I want to develop a form factor hardware, but that does not mean the consumer is stuck, unlike a conventional vehicle where the consumer's experience is stuck with the product that you buy. In the electric format, you can fundamentally rejig the experience through your software and OTA updates, etc., etc. So I heard you refer to that, and I must compliment you because that is well thought of. That said, I mean, so I think first of all, I echo your assessment of the market opportunity. I echo your sentiment around what can and how it can happen. I think the areas that I would uh, love to hear more about for my benefit and for the benefit of the audience on the show here today is how do you want to differentiate? And of course, a trivia question would be how did the name Euler come up? And does it have semantics or does it have inspiration or does it embody the vision that you have? So do mention about that trivia. But beyond the trivia of the name, and by the way, the name sounds quite good. You just have to make sure people pronounce it as Euler and not sort of Euler or whatever. But I think the important thing is how do you see the differentiation in the conception of your offering? And I would say the differentiation from the standpoint of the consumer, who is the most important person. So, would you say that I will give you parity product performance? Like you said, your thesis was you don't want to be inferior to diesel, CNG, petrol, and I think that is well thought. So, would you be sort of parity on performance and basic usage, but you would bring in the element of clean? Or would you deliver superior economics, which is just the cost of operations? And the third one, if I may suggest, and I know there can be many, or are you looking at differentiation, different vectors, not just the fact that you can update through software, but from a consumer perspective, if the consumer's journey of ownership is 5 years, like you said, 6 years, you buy for, buy, pay the EMI 3 years, and then you have an extra 2 years in which you don't pay EMI, so you make a, disproportionately larger sort of net cash surplus, and then there is a second life, etc. How are you looking at the differentiation vectors? And if you think about that, the tail question to that would be, and I'm putting all that up front because so that you can think through it holistically and not when you answer, but when you educate us with your thinking. This is not a Q&A. This is a mutual learning conversation session. I would say highlight for us the vectors of differentiation versus the conventional product form, which is what the masses and the population uses today because the installed base is very high. And how are you thinking of vectors of differentiation versus others like you who have either entered or are about to enter the space? Let me pause there. You can start with the trivia, Euler, and then talk about the vectors of differentiation. Thank you, Saurav. Over back to you.
Thanks, Roshin sir. So basically, so when we were thinking about the name, Euler was one I mean, so name. So naming the company is actually one of the first thing that you think about, even when you think that okay, this is something that you want to build. Name is the first thing that you want to it becomes very personal, and from then it's more like something you are fundamentally going to execute. So Leonard Euler was the mathematician, and Euler is taken from there, and it's a equation or Euler constant. This is something that you can see in the aspect of mechanical engineering. It's something, people have seen it in mathematics with the imaginary number, complex number. There's an equation that is there, Eulerian angle. So there is all bit of the engineering side of it. Then the Euler symbol is E, and E is actually also electron, which is represents electricity. So it was a very good combination of your mechanical and electrical engineering coming together. And I think that's where where Euler made most amount of sense for us. And it was very personal also, because being an engineer by heart, and I believe technology would be key at the center of what we are going to build. So that's where the name sort of came in, and how we built that out. On the product part that you spoke about, and the differentiation, so performance is definitely one area that we wanted to make sure that our product stands out when you talk with the customer experience. So we didn't want so basically, before building, we actually went and interviewed a lot of the fleet owners and customers, and what do they think about three-wheeler cargo vehicle, and what are some of the major concern that they had. And one of the major thing that they told us in their language is कि electric गाड़ी में टान नहीं होती है, and when we decipher that basically mean that the vehicle don't have strength. They feel that it's very fragile vehicle. They don't have confidence that these vehicle will be able to take the payload, or will be able to move up the ramp, or will stay for 7-8 years in their typical sort of ownership journey. So when I mean about what I mean about performance is a simple word, but it dissects into, can this vehicle can be overloaded to 70-80%, which is what the customers do. And actually, if you think about it, it's not what they want to do. It's something they don't want to say no to an opportunity of earning when it happens in their day. So let's just say they are standing at a stand and a customer calls ki mere paas ye delivery karna hai. He will never say no to that opportunity. And that opportunity sometime means 70% overloading. Sometime it means taking loaded content from a basement of a building, which is at a much higher grade than what your typical flyovers are at. So electric vehicle from that standpoint has to be superior. If it has to beat an IC engine, it cannot be. It can perceived as an inferior variant of the vehicle, which some of the traditional three-wheeler cargos retrofits that we had seen existed in the market. So that is the one differentiation that we wanted to make sure you can load whatever you are getting within that. Of course, the segment load, it will deliver that, and you don't have to think twice about its performance from that angle. So that's the first experience that we want the customers to have, and we kind of drill that down. We'll do that whether it's in our BTL activities, or an advertisement, or in our whatever let's just say experiments that we will do with the customers on the ground. The other differentiation that you also spoke about, what are the, other than the product, what are the other sort of differentiation vectors that you think? The ownership is also something that we want to change. So typically in IC engine vehicle, we started asking, okay, there is a 3 to 4 year this EMI time period, and why does customer end up selling vehicle at the end of 5 years, and where does this 5 year came from in that whole market? Where is this magic number coming? And the answer to that was actually around when engine gets opened, when IC engine ka jo main component is the engine of the vehicle, once that gets opened up, as in because there was an engine issue, your cost of servicing actually increases really high. And that is the point, and that's roughly around 5 to 6 years for your diesel and petrol vehicles. For CNG, it's even a bit earlier, because CNG being bit dry fuel. So that was their transition. We want to shift that journey. We want that experience of owning that electric vehicles to be over 7 years, 8 years instead of 5 years. So we might start with a 4 or 5 year journey because that's where the market and that's where everything is. But eventually we want to push that. And I think that's where your software experience comes into an effect really well, because somebody who has bought a vehicle, when the transition is happening 7 8 years later, if you actually go 7 8 year back with the smartphone and feature phone journey, today your experience around smartphones are very different from what regular phones were. And I believe that as electric vehicle will also progress, a lot of software will start impacting that journey. It could be the impact on finding nearest charging station, to scheduling your servicing, to being able to figure out what's my utilization, can I enroll this vehicle on a different platform which can generate me more revenue. So there are multiple things that a software can solve, just because vehicle is connected at the back end, if the customer allows it to be. And that journey helps him from a commercial point, from the anxiety point of view, and overall just owning a better vehicle experience. So that is like how, I mean, these are some of the differentiation vector that we have sort of thought through.
Yeah, if I may just build on what you're saying, I would just offer a couple of suggestions, and maybe you're already thinking about that. I think it's very good to think about a differentiated product, and I would encourage that, because you are in the unique position where you're innovating in a greenfield space. You're literally sort of writing your own script. I would just say that, much as you have spent good time of the last 3 years in thinking through the product, you and your core team members must significantly think through the business model differentiation and think about all aspects of business model. So business model from ownership to second life, business model from acquisition to pay per use, subscription, variable cost, variabilizing the cost of ownership, certainly thinking through the finance barrier. The point that you mentioned about finance barrier is correct. The question is, as an OEM, which is what you are going to be fundamentally, what are you going to do to take care of the barriers and myths, or at least barriers if not myths, that exist in the minds of the financer? So if I'm the financer, I'm looking for assurance. I'm looking for assurance because I'm not sure what this vehicle value would be, how would it be used, if it's impounded, what will happen, etc. So build into your product proposition and go-to-market strategy the other elements that take care, because let me assure you, if you're going to grow 10x with limited finance, you are going to grow 100x with good finance. And if you have green check, blank check financing like you have for two-wheelers, you are going to grow 1000x. And I'm sure somebody as talented as you must think of 1000x. And if finance is going to be a key barrier, then you want to build in your product and go-to-market strategy those elements of warranty, assurance, second life, usage, subscription, etc., 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 valuation, buyback, etc., etc., so that the finance guy has no qualms. And then my suggestion would be begin to build some partnerships. All financiers are not the same. Every customer is not the same. But much as you don't choose too many customers, you can choose the financier. So build a strategic partnership for those who can see the long-term journey and the long-term value. Build it into your go-to-market strategy. And then it's a win-win. The finance guy finances and therefore gets a new market segment. The customer gets to own and use and is smiling. And you get to sell more vehicles which people will use. So think through the business model, think through the elements in your proposition, and go-to-market strategy beyond product becomes extremely critical. Not to say that product is certainly table stake and that must be delivered to the high standards that you're putting yourself to. Let me pause there and see if you have a comment on what I've said, and then turn it back to Nabil.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think what I meant about financing is that's definitely one of the things that's I would say, coming in if that gets solved, then your transition gets accelerated at a very high speed. And to solve for that, and I think some of the points that you mentioned, our go-to-market was actually not going the way traditional OEM does the business, which is selling the vehicle to, let's just say, a distributor or through showroom dealership, sell it to the customer. We actually went to customers who are ready to take these vehicles for a longer period of ownership, like e-commerce guys like your Flipkart, Big Basket, Udans, Ecom Express of the world, and get them to take the vehicle and have financier back that agreement, and then get a set of customers or driver who are willing to drive these vehicle, get a committed sort of earning, and be able to pay the EMI, and get the even the NBFCs and banks bought into that loop. So we are solving. So our go-to-market is actually starkly different from what a traditional OEM takes and their journey, what it takes to get to the first, let's just say, 10,000 customer. Our journey is actually at a very 90-degree to what they would traditionally do. And the reason we built that was because of some of these concerns that we faced around the secondary value financing and customer comfort. And that's where Euler comes in, provides with some of these comfort with a customer who understand, who has seen the journey of the product over a period of time, and readying, saying that, okay, we will use these 2,500 vehicle in our last mile delivery. So that's how we have broken into it. But I think as some of these financiers have come in, if there were a lot of these transition, as you have rightly said, it would grow 10x to 1,000x like in no time.
Build the partnerships and build a skin in the game, and I think from the 100 people who are available in the market, you will find 4 or 5 who will be able to see the value. And as they say, you don't need 100 girls, you probably need just one girl to marry. So you just need 2 or 3 like-minded finance partners, and with them you can build the business. But partner with them. Don't just look for finance terms. Partner with them and create and curate a product finance solution which works for the consumer, works for the financer, and works for yourself. So it's about partnerships. So, and I'm sure you'll do it well. Over to you, Nabil.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok ji. Very good point raised. And Saurav, I'm sure you are quite ready for the market right now. Just want to understand, we have seen in terms of passenger vehicles or car segment, the claim versus actual has remained, there's a wide gap in terms of quality. How are you trying to manage? What is the a range that you are going to offer in your three wheelers, and how are you managing that? A higher range means a higher cost of ownership.
Yes, you're right. Fundamentally right. I think the way so the range that comes on a leaflet, commercial vehicle leaflet, right? So that's a range that, let's just say, one of the homologation agencies have tested the vehicle with certain, let's just say, payload in a certain driving life cycle. The range that you actually get, your observed or the true range on ground, that is the range that customer gets. And there are different set of customer. There would be someone who would overload the vehicle. Let's just say in three-wheeler, you typically get the vehicle passed at 500 to 700 sort of kgs of payload, but then they would overload it to 1 ton, 900 kg. There are your driving behavior in summer days, winter days, your braking behavior, acceleration behavior,
No, just
all of
one.
this fundamentally changes the range of the vehicle. So
No,
what
no.
you
In
see on
ideal condition,
certificate,
what is your range in ideal condition? What on the ideal payload? What is the range that you are going to offer?
so the way we looked at range, so I was just coming to that. So it is going to be very different. So what we looked at was that from after 4 years, that vehicle should still be able to deliver that 80 to 100 kilometers of range, so that that customer is able to get still continue to earn and have that confidence in EV. So we backtracked that journey, and we said, today I need to think about not the 80 and 100 today, but I have to think about 80 to 100 in, let's just say, 3 to 4 years down the line. So today, for instance, we would start looking at 100 kilometers, and that will degrade over a period of time. Now that's where your software and some of that point starts becoming very, very important. How do you manage efficiency of the battery? How do you manage? And those are some of the technology where Euler has fundamentally goes in, built liquid cooled battery pack to make sure that the temperature and some of these does not impact, built electronics that can push for that efficiency gains as the battery pack ages with period of time. So लोगों को 80 to 100 is what people want. They don't want 200, 300 kilometers of range in commercial vehicle. That's the another beauty of why we looked at commercial vehicle ownership. They don't suddenly decide to, if you're in Delhi, to go to Agra, Jaipur, Manali. That doesn't happen. They would still run within the city for 300 days that they would run the vehicle. So 80 to 100 is good enough, and that's what we in our communication we always talk about, that it will do 100 kilometer. It might do much more initially, but yeah, that's
I
about
think
it.
80 to 100 will be a bit. I don't think you will lose out on a lot of big market share. Ashokji, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I was just coming in there. I think it's a combination of the razor and the blade. So while you talk about the range, it really depends what's the bullseye for your core consumer. I would offer a suggestion that you have to think through the integrated piece, which is what is the range, and therefore what is the charging ecosystem network that you want to create. And it may seem that maybe in your version 1 product you're going for a range which is only 80 to 100 kilometers because you're going for hyper local, etc. But I think through the mapping. So if it's Delhi NCR as your core first footprint, look at what charging density do you need, and then look at the per CPM and the queuing up as to what charging density, what waiting time, what cost, because the amount of time that the vehicle will take to charge, that is downtime. And in commercial usage, the uptime of the vehicle is the most critical thing. So the trade-off between the vehicle range, the charging density, the cost, and importantly, the downtime because of charging may lead you to a conclusion. I would offer, if I was to say, it will lead you to a conclusion where sooner or later in the next versions of your product, you will need a range better than that because consumers would not like. What would be the charging time required for this version 1 product? If it's not secret, you can tell us, and tell us a little bit about the price and cost of charging as well. But most importantly, how much time will it take to charge, and will it need to go to 100 like fast charging 80, or will it need fast and slow? Because if you don't do fast and slow combination based on your battery engineering, sometimes the battery drainage and the battery characteristics change, and then between summer and winter there could be a fluctuation of almost 20%. So just talk a little bit about that, because that eventually will determine if your end consumer, who is B2B, gets the uptime, and that will determine the profitability and the appeal of the proposition. I hope I've been able to articulate a couple of interesting but very, very practical on the road issues, right? I've been selling commercial. Yes. A lot of Hero motorcycles used to be used for commercial. So the payload you will put on a 3-wheeler, we used to put it on our Splendor bike where people would put 40, 50 kilos of grain and take it away. So I understand that. And now at my work with the electric space, I also understand the dynamics of charging. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. And Nabil, thanks for letting me the opportunity to ask the question.
So, Vishen, right points. I think all of that are fundamentally. So, the range question alone is not the product feature. I mean, so range is what 80 to 100 is what I meant is customer requires in a day, and that's something the median that we have seen over most of the delivery. So, let me take a step back and give you the thesis. When we thought about the product market fit, we first solved the problem for a small segment of the e-commerce, FMCG, utilities, and we said that let the first product solve their use case, and then we can iterate onto the next product, and as we continue to expand, because you have to take one segment of market, win there, and build confidence in progress with the product. Because you can't put an infinitely large battery pack to give, let's just say, 150 kilometers to kill the anxiety. We believe that we should fix the 80 to 90% median and then couple it with the charging station that needs to be deployed. So today, Euler has a network of 100 charging stations deployed in Delhi NCR across 6 to 8 hubs that runs in Gurgaon, Delhi, and Noida. So we built that. The third part was the timing anxiety that you spoke about. So the first was infrastructure. And now on the timing part, if you charge our vehicle, for instance, through a regular point, it will take 4 hours to charge. But with some of our vehicles are enabled with even DC charging point, so you can fast charge it in 15 minutes and get a range that will be able to take care of that additional 20, 30, 40 kilometers that you have to do additionally in a day. And then there are options in between to do it in 1 hour, 2 hour, but those are the other point. But the way you solve this problem, at least that's the way we thought we should solve that problem. Put a battery pack that solves 90% of the use case of everyone, because you can't just over engineer for one product segment. Fix that, deploy a network of charging station, then use technology to solve for that timing anxiety so that they don't have to wait for 4 hours or 2 hours to charge. They can connect for 15 minutes and do that additional 30, 40 kilometers.
And avoid their waiting time by using technology which is mapping the charging
Charging
available, the
station
product, the vehicle, the
density, and
distance. The algorithm has to be multi-dimensional algorithm, so that it's
yes.
not just the charging time, but it's also the time that it takes to reach there, which is the dry time. Then it takes the time to wait and wait in the queue. So the whole cycle time, basically the net uptime has to be maximized.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
you mentioned about earlier in our earlier discussion that you will be getting into passenger courier, commercial passenger courier also. Just want to understand how is that progressing. Number two, you talked about that you are going to expand into the commercial space further. Is that mean you are getting into trucks, and what's the idea? What is the next leap there?
So on all of these products, so there are two tracks within the company. One is the engineering and the research track. So there they continue to build the passenger, the even the other four-wheeler form factor of vehicles. So that by definition we continue to do R&D, and it's for our own understanding, more for I mean, we also want to continue to push the limits of what we can do on the product side. On the commercial side, on the business side, we see that we will remain focused on the cargo for the at least the next 2 years. I don't see ourselves deviating too much into the, because the kind of customer that buys a passenger vehicle and that buys a cargo vehicle, that is very different. I mean, not just from their usage to financing, all of that is very different. Even solving for your charging station, all of that becomes a more complicated problem. So we decided to focus on one market, do that really well, and once we are able to solve that, expand to the other markets rather than trying to get to a larger market immediately. But on a product side, we continue to build all the form factor, and that's also make sure that we are ready from a product, and whenever we feel that time is right, we can go ahead and launch it.
Are you using
So
your own capex for the charging infrastructure, and how are you dealing with the cost of real estate and all of that, or are you just sort of partnering and you are aggregating it on your platform from a technology standpoint, but the real physical aspects of charging, which is space, reality, electric charge, and the installation and the capital and the maintenance, is that being sort of outsourced? How are you looking at that model?
So for the initial journey, we put the money where we were. I mean, where we were thinking. So because that we wanted to make sure that skin in the game for us, and it puts us right focus. We optimize the right things. But as we continue to grow, I think for us to accelerate that growth, we will at some point, when we believe that we have the right product and the I mean, when I say product, in the even the charging station, by definition it's extension. At that point, we'll start to franchise that out and build a network and work with other partners who are also building some of these AC and DC 00 point. So with government of India putting that the standards of charging station, it's very easy for you to build for interoperability. So that's something we have designed from that point of view, and we believe that as we'll scale, we will take help from other infrastructure partners as well in the journey. But today, all of it is 100% owned by Euler Motors.
Mm.
uh, are you looking at further raising funds, or because you see that you are talking about 1000x and all? So, will to scale up to that level, how do you want? Which route you want to adopt?
See, the fundamentally capital is very important to electric vehicle. It's a capital intensive business. Unlike software, the quantum of capital is much higher, and so we are always, I think, look out for investor. I think, वो घर आते हुए लक्ष्मी को you cannot say no. So that's so anytime that someone reaches out, we continue to chat. I think what we are interested in also speaking to investors that can take that kind of conviction that we had on the space, because and in that way, Nabil, I think we are very fortunate with Bloom Ventures and Jetty Ventures, Asian Development Bank, and Inventors Capital India, that they took that bet in 2018 and 19, and then continue to back us even during the COVID, when a lot of manufacturing was shut down for almost 5 months in the last 2 years. So we are always look out for investor who are thinking about long term, not thinking about what it would mean immediately in the 3 years, 4 years, but think on a longer path with us. So always look out,
So you don't have any
on the
limitation,
lookout.
like the promoter should have this much of share or equity, how much you have already let go, and what is your target? Where do you want to stop in terms of promoters' share?
The answer to that question is definitely number. I mean, obviously it matters. I mean, what's the percentage work, but it's also the value that you're creating. If the kind of value that continues to increase, and your and interests are aligned long term, and so when that is there, I don't think you necessarily have to be worried. I think there is this people talk about that 1% of, like, a very large company is much better than owning 100% or 30% of a small company. But having said that, I mean, it is important to have good skin in the game, and this is my prime source of, like, in fact, like everything that I do right now. When I wake up and to the time I sleep, it's Euler, and sometimes even in sleep I am getting Euler dreams. So I think it has gone to the point that it has hijacked even that sleep time.
So just want to
So
how much you own right now and how much of it is owned by the investors right now.
So I think the data is on the MCA. To be very honest, it's a open data, but if it would be somewhere between 30 to 40%. I think would be with the promoters and the employees of the company, and then roughly 60%, 60 to 70% would be with the investors.
So you have given the larger share in very early stage. Do you find it comfortable? Ashok ji, how do you see this?
So I think fundamentally thinking through value versus percentage shares is more important, because there will always be a trade-off. I do think it's a capital-intensive business, and that's why my question about partnerships and charging infrastructure, etc. I think you should consider three things. You may be already doing that. I think no matter how much capital you raise, it will always be finite. Think where you are going to use your own capital, and where you are not going to have to dilute your capital but use somebody else's capital. So that is where I think what you are going to outsource, what you are going to partner, what you're going to collaborate. Otherwise, for everything, if you start using your capital, not just from a dilution standpoint, I think fundamentally I would say it would be a less efficient use of the precious capital. So that's my first suggestion or recommendation. Prioritize what you will use your own capital for. Second is, I think through the debt aspect. We didn't talk about it because this is not a full discussion about financing, but I think through debt and think through venture debt very importantly. And lastly, I think look at leveraging other capital, not just in the product phase, which is working capital and material and charging, but think about it both upstream and downstream, which is pre-product, which is ancillaries, etc., 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 and out in the market, the whole GTM piece. I don't know how you're looking at your distribution, how you're looking at your service infrastructure, etc., because whether it is fixed or working, it is all capital. So I would say develop your sweet spot. This is where I'm going to spend my dollars, and my $1 is going to work to 100, because I'm going to use $99 of other people for whom there is a value to get created as well. I think that would be good. And then after that, if your shareholding as a promoter is X, then that's the best you could have got. But more importantly, as a founder, as a promoter, as an entrepreneur, efficient use of capital, efficient leverage of financing options, efficient use of debt and equity as a combination, and strongly leveraging collaboration and partnership is the suggestions that I would offer. You must be already thinking about it, but I'm just reiterating what I would do if I was in your shoes. Nabil, I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Ashok ji. You have beautifully summarized, and I'm sure Saurav has great entrepreneurial acumen. I have known him for a long time. We often chat on the journey, on the innovation that he is thinking about, and I'm always impressed with him. Thank you so much, Saurabh. My best wishes to you, and hope you grow leaps and bounds. Thank you, viewers, for watching ET Auto Startup Adda Station for Innovation. We'll bring another startup innovator or disruptor on next Tuesday, same time. In the meantime, I must tell you, September 9 is the EV Day. So, ET Auto is carrying out a very extensive and exclusive coverage conversation on electric vehicles and its the entire electric vehicle or electric mobility space. We have a lot of experts and industry leaders who are going to join the conversation in terms of panel discussion that is going to take place live on September 9. And we have already started, um, article in-depth analysis and columns from the industry honchos. Do visit ET Auto to get all these at one place. Thank you so much once again for watching ET Auto. Stay tuned to ET Auto for all news, updates, and analysis on automobile and EV mobility space.